The strangest part of this story isn't that the Vikings built warm homes in a world of ice. It's that when modern engineers tried to copy those homes centuries later, they failed. Completely. Imagine that for a second. The North's toughest environment. Zero fancy tools, no electricity, no modern insulation. And yet the Vikings created a house design so effective it kept people alive through brutal winters, using only a handful of firewood. A design so efficient that by the time World War II rolled around, governments decided it was better hidden than shared. Because the truth was dangerous. Not dangerous to people, dangerous to industries. History's survival code. Welcome back to History's Survival Code, where forgotten knowledge hits harder than the present wants to admit. Today, we're going deep into one of the smartest environmental survival systems ever engineered by humans, centuries before the word engineering meant anything. This is the Silent Viking Home Technique Arctic settlers were ordered never to teach again. Now let's strip the story to its bones and get straight into the gold. How this thing worked, why it worked, and why people in power quietly locked it away. The Vikings didn't just throw up shelters to hide from the wind, they built living systems, breathable homes, structures that stayed warm without suffocating, flexible without collapsing, and quiet without being sealed shut. They were working in a world where the cold wasn't just something you felt, it was something that moved. Snow packed differently every week, winds shifted like living animals, and the ground itself rose and sank with every hard freeze. Most people who tried to build stiff-sealed houses in the Arctic ended up with cracked walls, moldy roofs, and damp floors. But Viking homes? They just kept standing. They bent instead of breaking. They breathed instead of rotting. And, the secret magic wasn't mystic at all. It wasn't runes or spells. It was physics, centuries before the textbooks, believe it or not. The heart of the design was what we now call passive thermal convection. The Vikings didn't need to name it. They just understood it, somehow. Their homes were built with thick layers of turf placed in a very intentional way. Each turf block was like a natural brick, packed with roots and soil that trapped pockets of air. These pockets created insulation, but not the dead-still kind that modern materials rely on. This was living insulation. The turf wasn't just blocking heat from escaping, it was directing air through slow, controlled movement. Warm air from the central fire rose upward and drifted through tiny channels purposefully crafted in the turf walls. Meanwhile, cool air slipped in low from the outside through narrow gaps between the outer turf layers and the stone foundation. The result was a constant, quiet breath of air inside the home. No drafts, no dead air. Just a soft, balanced circulation that kept humidity under control and prevented the deadly mold that crushed so many later European settlements. When modern researchers rebuilt and tested this airflow system, they discovered something shocking. A Viking home could hold a comfortable temperature of around 18 degrees Celsius, even when the outside world was dropping below -25 degrees. All with just a small fire. A few glowing coals could maintain warmth through the night. This wasn't insulation. It was a natural climate engine. And this is where the story jumps forward into the modern world. During the late 1930s and throughout World War II, Scandinavian engineers looking to build Arctic research stations and military shelters rediscovered these Viking principles. Suddenly, they saw a building technique that needed almost no fuel, almost no maintenance, and stayed warm, dry, and quiet on its own. They ran tests. The results were unbelievable. Turf-layered buildings outperformed fuel-heated barracks. They survived storms better. They kept temperatures stable. They didn't collect moisture. And they needed no electricity and no furnace systems. You can imagine what happened next. Civil defense departments immediately took notice. A shelter that could heat itself without consuming coal or oil? A building that made expensive heating systems unnecessary? That wasn't just a survival technique. That was a threat to profits, a threat to entire industries built on selling energy and equipment. So instead of promoting the technique, the governments tucked it away. Research went into classified civil defense papers. Builders were told turf construction was unstable and old-fashioned, and the Silent Viking heat hack was buried quietly by the very people who admitted privately that it worked better than their own designs. But here's the twist. Anyone today could still build something using those same principles. That's the part they didn't want to spread. The strength of a Viking house wasn't in exotic materials or rare knowledge. It was the simplicity. The stone base at the bottom stored heat during the day and released it slowly at night, acting like a natural thermal battery. The layered turf walls created a flexible, breathing barrier that handled Arctic winds without cracking. And the roof, low, heavy, curved, held heat like a giant thermal blanket while keeping the house acoustically quiet. No howling wind sounds, no cold spots, no echoing chamber. Even if you aren't building in the Arctic, you can still use the same principles for survival shelters, homesteads, or off-grid cabins. Build slightly into the earth to let the ground's stable temperature work for you. Use natural layers like soil, sand, or straw stacked in alternating directions to trap air. Add weight to your roof so it holds and releases warmth evenly. And most importantly, create natural airflow. A vent near the floor, a vent near the roof peak. Let warm air rise and draw fresh air in at a controlled pace. When the smoke from a small fire rises smoothly and exits cleanly, you've nailed the Viking balance. This wasn't superstition. It was survival intelligence sharpened over generations. A system created by people who watched the land, learned from it, and built homes that worked with nature instead of fighting against it. And maybe that's why the method was buried. Not because it was a failure, but because it succeeded in a way the modern world wasn't ready for. The Vikings taught us something powerful. Warmth doesn't have to come from machines. Stability doesn't require modern tech, and the best solutions often come from understanding the land beneath your feet. If this deep dive into forgotten survival engineering lit something inside you, make sure you subscribe to History's Survival Code. Share this with anyone who loves history, engineering, or real old-world resilience. The past still holds the answers. We just have to keep pulling them back into the light.